Hey, it's Wes here. Before we hop into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that this is a throwback episode from about a year ago. We released this episode last September when we were talking a lot about accountability. And if you have followed Leading in Dentistry for any period of time, you know that we use the Teach Leadership model to understand leadership. That stands for trust, expectations, accountability, consistency, and heart. And accountability is one of the things that leaders struggle with the most. How do I know when to give some small corrective feedback, and how do I know when I need to crank it up a notch and really start getting serious with my team members? So I hope that this episode gives you something to think about this week, something that you can implement into your practice or into your team. And with that, I hope you enjoy the episode, and we will see you next week. Welcome to this episode of the Leading in Dentistry podcast. I'm Dr. Wes Eggett. After spending the last 20 years in a variety of leadership positions, and as a student of leadership myself, I started Leading in Dentistry to share what I found and to continue learning with you. If anything from this episode stands out, check out the show notes, our online courses, or one-on-one coaching on leadingindentistry.com. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Leading in Dentistry podcast. I'm Dr. Wes Eggett. For those of you new to the podcast, I'm a practicing associate dentist just outside of Denver, Colorado, and I started Leading in Dentistry to help develop the leadership skills of each team member in the dental office, not just the business owner. And I started this podcast specifically while I'm not an owner of any dental practice, as I really want to get across the message that you don't need to wait until you're in charge to be a leader. Now, in this episode of the podcast, I want to dive a little bit deeper into something that I talked about on Instagram recently. I was talking about accountability, and we know that in the Teach Leadership model that we use at Leading in Dentistry, accountability is the third part of that. The Teach Leadership model goes trust, expectations, accountability, consistency, and heart. And so in this accountability part of that Teach Leadership model, this is the area where most people struggle. Well-intended leaders can come into a leadership position with all sorts of different ideas on things they want to do to make a difference. They come in motivated with ideas on ways they can change the systems, on ways they can motivate the team. But then when it comes time to hold people accountable, that's the area where most people are going to struggle. And one of my favorite quotes of all time, I've shared it a number of times on the podcast, is from Tim Ferriss. He says, "Your success in life is largely determined by the number of uncomfortable conversations you're willing to have." And as a leader, your success as a leader also is largely determined by the number of uncomfortable conversations you are willing to have, and to sit in that discomfort and try to help people become better. Accountability oftentimes will sound like holding someone's feet to the fire. It sounds like it's time to get somebody in trouble, but that's really not what it is. Accountability is a way to help people get trained to feel more comfortable doing the job that you're asking them to do. And if you are having a tough time training people to fill that position and to do what you need them to do, then accountability becomes finding the right seat on the bus for that person, or making sure that that person is even on the right bus. One of the other all-time favorite quotes amongst leaders is this quote from Simon Sinek, where he says, "Leadership isn't about getting the most out of your people, it's about creating an environment where your people can work at their natural best." And if they're not working at their natural best, then can you change the environment, or can you help them find a new environment? Because really, we want people to succeed and become the best version of themselves. And if they can't do that with you, then help them find another place to do it. So accountability sounds like this big, bad, scary monster, but really, if you break it down, it's something that's much more manageable, reasonable, and it's in the best interest of the people that you are leading. And this is a really relevant topic for our team and our practice right now, because we just redid our employee handbook. In fact, the day that we are recording this, we will be handing out our new employee handbook to our staff members today. And as we were going through this recently and reviewing our employee handbook and trying to beef it up a little bit, one of the areas that we noticed was a little bit weaker was the area about discipline and what it means to be in trouble and what being in trouble looks like. And we had this really good discussion. We came to the conclusion that if people don't know what being in trouble looks like, they're going to feel like every time someone gave them some corrective feedback or told them that they could do something differently, that they were being yelled at or that they were in trouble. But helping them understand what training looks like and what being in trouble looks like is very important. Because if they feel like every time you're giving them a corrective action that they're in trouble, they're going to go about their day feeling like they're constantly being watched and micromanaged. But if you help them know that this is a training environment and we're constantly training and constantly going over new ways on how to do things and helping you find better ways to do the things that you're already doing, then they feel like they're being built up and you are helping them become a better version of themselves. Then, when they know what discipline looks like, they know when to take it very seriously. And so in this recent Instagram post that I made, I talked about the 3 different phases of accountability, and we shelled this out a little bit more for our employee handbook, because that's what I wanted to go through today. So when developing this plan, we had to take into account a couple of different factors. And the first was, what does accountability look like in each of these different phases of accountability? What does it look like when we're training people? And then what does it look like when someone's getting in trouble in each of the different phases that we're escalating to? And then at those different phases or those different levels of accountability, who is holding the team member responsible, right? Who is actually having that difficult conversation? Because if you think that, oh yeah, this is our plan and this is what it looks like to be in trouble, and then someone actually does something that merits having a discussion, who's going to have that discussion? We don't want to have that discussion to figure that out. We want to know ahead of time when this happens, who's going to have the chat. Now, the 3 different chats that need to happen, these are the awareness check, the barrier check, and the reality check. The awareness check and the barrier check are going to be the 2 parts of the training process of the team member, and the reality check is going to be the disciplinary process. Let's start with the awareness check. Now, the awareness check is going to be held by the team lead. So if a dental assistant does something where they fall short, the team lead is going to be the person who has the awareness check discussion. And this is still part of training. This is not discipline quite yet. The awareness check is where the team lead comes in and says, hey, I noticed this happened. Were you aware that this is the expectation? And then they have that discussion with the team member where they tell them about why the thing happened the way that it did. And then the team lead can bring it back to, okay, I can recognize why this may have happened this time. Let's go ahead and set the expectation moving forward just so we understand and we're on the same page. This is what we expect. And that's that awareness check. So that's the first step, and it is part of the training. The next part is the barrier check. So this is also held by the team lead. This is a verbal discussion where the team lead can go to the team member and say, hey, I noticed this happened again. Remember when we talked about this being the expectation? So we were clear on what was supposed to happen, but it didn't happen again. So let's go ahead and figure out what's keeping us from making this happen the way that we're expecting. And then so you can go through with a team member and figure out, did you not have enough time to complete this task the way that we had intended? Did you not have the resources? Did you not have the equipment? So this is the barrier check. So that first step is the awareness check to see, do they know what the rules are or do they know what the expectation is? The second step is that barrier check to say, okay, we know what the expectation is, but what's keeping us from fulfilling that expectation? And at this point, you can agree with the staff member that they've been given the time, the equipment, the resources that they need in order to fulfill it, and that the expectation is clearly set. This makes it easier so that when it's time to escalate this conversation, everyone is on the same page. That yes, this was the expectation, and I've been given ample resources in order to make it happen. Just a quick interruption here. If you are gaining some value from this podcast, if you enjoy it in any way, if you think someone else could benefit from it, then go ahead and share this with a friend, share it with your team, share it with a colleague. It really helps support the show. Now let's get back to it. So this is when we've gone through the awareness check and the barrier check. Now we're going to come to the reality check. And this is when things are going to escalate into the disciplinary process. It's no longer part of the training, but this is when they start to take things a little bit more seriously because we're turning up the heat a little bit. And we thought it was important as we are developing this process to still empower the team lead. So the team lead is going to be the person who actually initiates the disciplinary process. This doesn't have to go through the office manager. The team lead has the ability to start those discussions. So the team lead will have the awareness check, they'll have the barrier check, and then they are the person who issues the first of 3 phases in the disciplinary process, which is the verbal warning. And the verbal warning is a discussion that the team lead will have with the team member, where they bring them in and say, hey, we talked about the expectations, we gave you all the resources in order to make it happen, and it's still not happening. We can't just keep telling you to do it. So this is a verbal, formal warning that we are escalating this into the disciplinary process if this continues. And that will set the stage for the team member to understand this is serious. This is not just so-and-so's being mean or so-and-so's mad at me. This is part of my job and I have to be able to take that seriously. And the type of person who takes this discussion well is the type of person that you want on your team. You know that they are someone who can take correction well and that they can improve. And the type of person who sees this type of discussion as offensive and they can't take that type of correction, that's the type of person that's not taking the job seriously. And you really need to ask yourself, is this a red flag for this person being a long-term member of the team? Now, after that verbal formal warning, then we have to go into a written warning. And we've decided to escalate the disciplinary process at this point by involving the office manager. So the team lead has had complete autonomy up until this point to make this call. They've been able to do the awareness check and the barrier check and the start of the reality check by having that verbal warning. But now the office manager gets involved for a written warning. So the team lead sets up a meeting with the office manager and the team member for them to come in and for them to sign something that says they've been given a formal warning and they understand what the expectations are moving forward, and they understand that this is an expectation of their job that they need to fulfill. After all of this has been done, the employee is very clear on the fact that this is what we want, this is what the expectation is, and they know at this point that things are serious. If it happens again, we allow for one more opportunity for them to improve because we want people to stay on the team. We don't want to have to find new team members. Turnover is expensive, so how can we give this person one last chance in order to make it right? And to meet that, our office provides this Hail Mary pass of the performance improvement plan. This is the employee knows they are on probation, and if anything else happens, they will be let go. And this performance improvement plan, they sit down with the office manager. The office manager has written out what the expectation is, the resources that have been given to the employee, and what the plan is moving forward for them to build up the skills in order to fulfill that requirement. Along with that, the office manager will set up routine checks to make sure that the employee is making progress towards that plan. And then the performance improvement plan will also specify what will happen if the employee does not fulfill those requirements and what those boundaries look like. And this will have to be on a case-by-case basis depending on how the employee is falling short. But this will lay out what it looks like to either come back from this probationary period or to help them find a different job, because your office is clearly not the place for them to become the best version of themselves. So a quick review of this process. The first part is training, just routine discussions with team members in order to help them improve in their positions. That involves the awareness check and the barrier check. So the awareness check is, I noticed that this happened. Were you aware that this is the expectation? And then set the expectation. The barrier check is, hey, I noticed that this happened again. Remember when we had that first discussion and we set those expectations? What's keeping us from meeting those goals? Where are we falling short? Do we not have the time, the resources, the equipment? What's going on there? So you have the awareness check and the barrier check. If you are clear with the employee about what the expectation is and you've given them the tools that they need to fulfill that requirement, then it's time to step into the disciplinary process with the team lead having that initial formal verbal warning. After that's been done, then we can escalate it to being with the office manager for a written warning. And that written warning specifies that, yes, I've had a verbal warning and I've been given opportunities for the training and I understand what the expectations are moving forward. And if all of that fails, then we have that Hail Mary pass at the end, which is the performance improvement plan, where the employee with the office manager is put on probation. They set up routine checks to help the person come back from this slump that they're going through, or to have routine checks to just see if a new job or finding a new place to work is in their best interest. So we have the awareness check and the barrier check, all part of training. And then we have the verbal warning, the written warning, and then the performance improvement plan before finally being let go or being fully back on the team and knowing that they are fulfilling the requirements and that we're happy to have them and that they're happy to be here. And I just want to reemphasize the end here. The importance for setting up this disciplinary plan is not because leaders are excited to get people in trouble. In fact, most leaders struggle with accountability and they struggle with having these discussions. The reason for setting up a disciplinary plan for your practice is so that people understand that most of the time they are not in trouble. And if they can go through their day not worried about what someone's going to say to them or worried about their job, then they can start working at their natural best. Then they can start becoming the best version of themselves and bringing them their best self to work instead of just keeping their head down and doing their job. I'll put a link in the show notes to the video about trusting teams from Simon Sinek, where he talks about this employee named Noah who he worked at 2 different hotels in Las Vegas. In one hotel, he was a barista who loved his job and felt appreciated by his leaders. And in the other job, he hated it because he just put his head down and went to work. And it was interesting because what Simon Sinek says about this guy Noah was that you could see him in either of those different positions and have a completely different experience. And it wasn't because Noah changed, it's because the leadership was different. And the environment set by the leaders is really what's going to determine how people interact with the members of your team and how your patients feel when they're in your practice. All of that comes back to how safe your employees feel at work. And when they know that most of the time they are just being trained and they're not in trouble, they're not worried about making mistakes, then they can start taking the risks that are necessary in order to grow. And with that, always be leading and always be learning. We'll see you next time. And that's it for this episode of the Leading in Dentistry podcast. If you learned something today, please leave a 5-star review and share the episode with a friend. If you're ready to take the next step for yourself or provide leadership training for a team member, visit leadingindentistry.com to check out our online courses and one-on-one coaching.